much longer without filming than I at all intended to do, so my sincerest apologies for that. Also, I have not forgotten about like the plan for hidden gem videos and all of that, so given that it's almost the end of March, I will make sure we get into that for April. Again, it was not my intention to go this long without filming, but sometimes that's just how life works, right? So, but the good news is, here we are. Since this is my first time filming in a completely new place, I hope the audio sounds okay, but we will figure that out as we go. So, for today's case, we will talk about a suburban housewife that completely vanished one day, and she was just described as somebody that would have never left her family intentionally, and one morning she was just gone. And so we will be talking about the case of Joan RISCH today. Now, before I fully dive into the case, let's get our housekeeping out of the way. Okay, so first housekeeping item. Down below in my pinned comment section, you will find 3 cases that I am interested in covering, and I need your help to choose which one sounds the most interesting, so please take a look and vote down below. Second, if you are not already subscribed here, I would greatly ask that you consider doing so. And then final housekeeping. I mentioned hidden gems briefly earlier, and in my cases, in my videos, I will drop a hidden gem, and that could be a fact about myself or a fact about the case. And when you hear that hidden gem, comment it down below, and when we get to the point that we get enough hidden gem comments on a video, I will make a note of it, and I will make that many extra videos per month. So let's say 5 of the videos get like 40 hidden gem comments on it. The following month, you would get 5 extra videos from me. I hope that makes sense. Also, just as an FYI, it is super windy here right now. It's storming. I was thinking like, wow, worst time to film, but you know what? Sometimes you just gotta power through it and let it be what it's gonna be. So here we are. So, housekeeping complete, and let's jump into this case. So, Joan RISCH lived a seemingly normal, happy life as a suburban housewife. But as I mentioned, she would vanish on the morning of October 24th of 1961. Something in her life must have transpired that would cause her to disappear so suddenly. When her young daughter returned home from a play date, it would be discovered that Joan had been the apparent victim of an abduction. Now, there had been several reports of a disoriented woman walking along nearby roads where Joan lived, but nothing would come of these reported sightings. Police had found out that Joan had recently taken an interest in true crime literature, and they knew this because they were able to take a look at some of the books that she had checked out from her local library. And the police would describe this as sinister because there was an odd similarity to some of the things or books Joan was born on May 12th of 1930 in Brooklyn, New York, to Harold and Josephine. Joan Carolyn Bard would very unfortunately suffer a tragic childhood. At the age of 8, the Bard family moved to New Jersey, where in 1939, when Joan was either 8 or 9, her parents died in what would be described as a suspicious fire. When her parents died, she would go to live with relatives who would formally adopt her, and she would take their surname, Natras, as her own, and she would apply for a social security number under that name and really just take that name on as her own. Many years later, an acquaintance of Joan's would reveal that Joan had confided in her that she had suffered sexual abuse as a child. So clearly, she did not have a picture-perfect upbringing by any means. She would go on to attend Wilson College in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and she would obtain a degree in English literature. And upon her graduation, she would work as a publisher. She worked at a publisher. She started as a secretary, and she eventually moved up to become a supervisor of the secretarial pool, or the clerical staff there. And ultimately, she became an editorial assistant at Harcourt, Brace, and World, and later Thomas Y. Crowell Company. Now, at some point during this time, she would meet a man by the name of Martin RISCH, who was an executive at one of these companies, and they would hit it off and go on to get married in 1956, at which time she would kind of put her career aspirations to the side in order to raise a family with Martin. Together, they would live in Ridgefield, Connecticut, where they welcomed their first child, Lillian, in 1958, and then a son in 1959 by the name of David. In April of 1961, they would move to Lincoln, Massachusetts, which was somewhere outside of Boston, and would become valued members of the community. Martin began a career with the Fitchburg Paper Company, while Joan became active in the League of Women's Voters, and often spoke of her plans to become a teacher after the children got older and get back to being a working woman. Let's go back to the time of the day that she goes missing. The morning of October 24th started much like any other day for the RISCH family, doesn't it always? Martin got up early to catch an 8 o'clock in the morning flight from Logan Airport, which I think is in Boston, to New York City for a business trip he had previously planned, which required him to stay overnight in Manhattan. Shortly after Martin left the home in his car, Joan would wake up the kids and start making them breakfast. She would take her son David across the street to the home of a neighbor by the name of Barbara Barker, and then left in her car with Lillian. She would attend an appointment at her dentist's office usual when outside of the property. When Joan returned to the neighborhood, she picked up her son from the neighbor's house and then went home around 11:15 in the morning or so. Shortly after this, a delivery driver would knock on the door to their house to collect several of Martin's suits for dry cleaning. He also would later say that he recalled nothing out of the ordinary about Joan or the family home. Everything really seemed normal. Now, once the driver left, Joan changed out of the clothes that she had worn to the dentist and out shopping and into more formal attire, described as a blue house dress and white sneakers. She would then make lunch for the children and put David down for an afternoon nap, from which he always woke up from around 2 p.m. Now, Barbara Barker, the same neighbor that had watched David earlier that day, would come to the house at around 1 p.m. and she would bring her son Douglas, who was around 4 years old, to play with Lillian. She would then end up going back home across the street, but she would observe Joan coming in and out of the house to prune some plants, and remembered seeing her place the shears that she had used back in the garage. Shortly before 2 o'clock, Joan came out of the house with the children, walking across the street to the Barker's house. She would tell the young children that she would come back. Lillian, Risch, and Douglas Barker would play on a swing set outside, but from where they could not see the Risch house. At about 2:15, Barbara Barker briefly saw Joan outside, moving quickly up her driveway, wearing what looked like a trench coat over her clothing and carrying something red with outstretched arms from her car towards the garage. Now, when Barbara saw all of this, she just assumed that Joan was chasing one of the children. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Joan Risch. Roughly an hour later, at 3:15 p.m., Virginia Keene, the daughter of the Risch family, next-door neighbors, got off the school bus, and as she approached her home, she recalled seeing an unfamiliar vehicle. Later on, this would be described as possibly a General Motors model. It was dirty and two-tone in color, with one of those colors being blue. 5 minutes after seeing this vehicle, another resident who lived on a nearby street reported how they had to stop while driving up the street that they lived on called Old Bedford to let a car back out of either the Keynes or the Risch's driveway. Both Virginia and her mother were adamant that there was no car in their driveway at that time. In the meantime, Barbara Barker saw her son playing outside with Lillian Risch and would take her back to her home at around 3:40 in the afternoon, as she wanted to take her own kids out on a shopping trip with her. Barbara had assumed that Joan was still in the house and never checked to see otherwise before leaving. When she had returned from her shopping trip at around 4:15, Lillian would come back to Barbara's house and said, quote, kitchen is covered with red paint." End quote. Now, by this time, little David had awoken several hours earlier and was crying in his crib because his diaper needed to be changed. So at this point, Barbara is very worried by what Lillian has shared and would go over to Joan's house herself. And she would find that what Lillian told her was very much true. So at 4:33 p.m., in a very panicked state, Barbara would call the police. And within 5 minutes of her call, Police Sergeant Mike McHugh would arrive at the RISCH house, and after briefly speaking with Barbara Barker, he would enter into the home. And in the kitchen, you would find blood smeared on the floor and walls, and also described that an overturned table was blocking the entrance. The handset of the wall-mounted telephone had been ripped loose and thrown inside a waste basket, which had been taken from its usual place under the sink, and it had been left in the middle of the floor. Sergeant McHugh would make a search of the house, honestly initially thinking that Joan RISCH had committed suicide, but her body would not be found in the house. So at this point, the sergeant would call for backup to search the surrounding area to see if they could find her at all. And Sergeant McHugh was advised by the desk officer who had dispatched him that he should call Police Chief Leo Algeo, and told him it might be possible that the entire department would need to end up helping with this investigation. Now at this point, they're thinking that if Joan was still alive, she would be in pretty bad shape given the amount of blood that was in the home. So they would contact local hospitals and asked if someone matching her description was there, and also asked that they immediately notify the police department if a woman matching Joan's description turned up or had already been admitted at the hospital. And while this is going on, back inside the house, detectives would work diligently to try and uncover exactly what had transpired in the home. So according to police, the blood evidence pointed to some kind of altercation, but investigators could not conclude how it might have occurred. There were large smears on the kitchen walls and the floor, as well as some on the phone that had been ripped from the wall. Okay, hidden gem. The hidden gem of this case is that the telephone had been ripped from the wall. A roll of paper was also left lying on the floor, a piece of which had been used to wipe some blood, according to police, possibly off a person's hand, but that was just speculation. More blood would be found on a coverall and a pair of underwear that belonged to little David, which were found on the floor, and police also speculated that maybe these had been used to clean up the blood. It seemed that the coverall had been pressed into the floor as if a heavy weight, perhaps a body, had laid on them for some time. Police would later say that while the blood stains in the kitchen may investigators would uncover more blood outside of the kitchen. So throughout the house and outside, droplets of blood would be found. An 1/8 of an inch wide droplet was on the first step of the stairway, while 2 more of similar size were found at the top of the stairs, along with 8 further drops in the master bedroom and 1 near a window in the children's bedroom. A trail of blood was found to lead out of the kitchen and out on the driveway, where the blood trail would stop by Joan's car. There would be 3 stains on the vehicle, specifically on the left side of the hood of the car near the windshield, the right rear fender, and the very center of the trunk. And it was unknown under what circumstances these stains came to be made. Investigators also really could not determine where the bleeding may have first started, but they would speculate that it was either in the kitchen, upstairs in the master bedroom, or outside in the driveway, all of which technically were possibilities. And another, pressing question at this time is, what happened, and did Joan leave her house of her own free will, or was she abducted and taken involuntarily? Because the end of the blood trail in the driveway offered the possibility that she may have gotten into a car at that point, but it wasn't entirely certain. Now, one of the perplexing parts of this was the fact that there were no bloody footprints, despite there being an abundance of bloody smears on the kitchen floor. So perhaps if there was somebody involved, they were incredibly careful, but kind of hard to do given the amount of blood that was at the crime scene. And so to police, if somebody was involved, it seemed that whoever this person was walking throughout the house had managed to enter the kitchen and leave no footprints. Now, you could say they were extremely careful, or simply just extremely fortunate. They would also test the blood and would determine that it was type O, which was the same blood type as Joan, but I do also think that type O is one of the more common blood types. There's O negative and O positive. One of them is universal and I think rare, but I think the other one is the most common. Don't quote me though. Now, interestingly enough, at least to me, that although it appeared that there was so much blood in the house, a state police chemist would actually say that it would not result in a life-threatening wound, and that the total amount of blood found would have probably been equivalent to half a pint, which would not again suggest a life-threatening injury. So while all of this was going on, Barbara Parker would call Martin, Joan's husband. She would call his company trying to locate him to let him know what had happened. When she learned that he was away on business in New York, the Massachusetts State Police called him to inform him of a family emergency, and he immediately changed his plans and would catch the next flight home to Massachusetts. Massachusetts. So the police would continue on with their search and investigation, kind of perplexed as to what transpired, but they would look for further clues. They noted that 4 letters had been delivered to the mailbox, which was at the foot of the driveway, but they had not been collected by Joan. In the kitchen, the telephone directory was found to have been opened to the page where emergency numbers could be written down, although none had actually been written in the book. There was an empty liquor bottle that was found in the garbage can, and Martin would later tell the police that his wife had finished that the night before, although he was not able to account for where several empty beer bottles might have come from that were found. That trench coat that she was reported being seen wearing earlier that morning, as she, I think it was when she had left for the dentist, that had been left behind. Investigators would also find her pocketbook that had been left behind and determined that after the purchases she made since cashing a check the previous evening, she would have had less than $10 left. And so at this point, there was very little evidence, if any, pointing directly to the whereabouts of Joan. Police would set about trying to see if anyone saw anything that might help in this investigation. As detectives canvassed the neighborhood, they would learn that several of the residents had reported potential sightings of a woman that could have been Joan. As we know, Barbara was the last person to have seen her, which was around 2:15 in the afternoon. But at 2:45 in the afternoon, a woman was seen wearing similar clothes to RISCH, according to a witness. This woman was seen walking along the north side of Route 2A, west of its junction with Old Bedford, which was headed toward Concord. And this woman had a handkerchief kind of hair tie wrapped around her head, but around her chin as well, is the way it's described. Almost as if you would see an ice pack being held to someone's chin, is the way that I pictured that. So not necessarily something you would normally see with somebody just walking around. And according to this same witness, this woman appeared unkempt and to be wandering around, hunched over as if she were cold. There would be another sighting of a similarly dressed woman, and this time this person would reported seeing blood dripping down this person's legs. This occurred sometime between 3:15 and 3:30 in the afternoon, and the woman was seen walking north on the Route 128 median strip. According to this witness, this woman seemed disoriented and appeared to be cradling something at her stomach. There would be a third sighting, which was around 4:30 in the afternoon, which involved a woman walking south along Route 128 near Trapelo Road. And there were also sightings of the unknown two-tone car seen in the area that Virginia Keene had reported to be in the driveway of Joan's house. And the neighborhood milkman would also state that he had seen it there when he had made his morning delivery that day. was seen by another neighbor, which had been parked on Sunnyside Lane, which was a street that intersected Route 2A near Old Bedford at about 4:15. This eyewitness said that they saw a man get out of the car, cut some branches from the nearby woods, and then put them back in his vehicle. And then another man would come forward to tell police that he saw a light blue 1959 Ford sedan parked along Sunnyside Lane at around 2:45 p.m. So clearly a lot of eyewitnesses reporting different things, but nothing really concrete. Now, I feel like we all kind of know when a woman goes missing or when a man goes missing, either way, technically, or if there's a violent crime, you look at their spouse or their significant other as a potential suspect. But almost immediately, police would confirm that Martin had an alibi. He really was away on business and he was not involved. They would also look into the milkman briefly, because he was one of the few people in the immediate area that had come by Joan's home the day of her disappearance, but he was elsewhere at the time that she went missing. Police would investigate Robert Foster as a possible suspect because some of the residents nearby had cast suspicion. Robert Foster worked as a purchasing agent with the National Park Service, and he had been visiting homes in the area to discuss a certain project with residents. The area that the Rich's neighborhood was in was designated by Congress in 1959 as a National Historical Park. This area was recognized as a historical importance because it fell on the route that the British troops had taken when they marched out of Boston to the battles of Lexington and Concord, which was something that was considered the beginning of the Revolutionary War. So very much a historical significance for United States history, and this project included plans to acquire and remove all structures built after 1775 in an effort to restore the area to its historical appearance. So, quite the big plan, and probably something that residents did not necessarily love the idea of. So again, Robert Foster was the purchasing agent overseeing this project, and a state police detective would interview him a week after her disappearance and was told by some of the women in the area that they felt as though Mr. Foster had overstayed his welcome. The records would show that Robert Foster had visited Joan's home on September 25th, which was a month before she vanished. And on the day that she disappeared, Robert would tell detectives that he had gone out for lunch with his supervisor around 1 o'clock that afternoon. And he would say that he went back to the Lincoln area by 3 o'clock to meet with a property appraiser. And this account was verified by the supervisor, who also vouched for 2 civil engineers who had been working for him in the area, making preparations for this park in the project, and explained that they were back in the office by 3 o'clock as well. So, Mr. Foster and his acquaintances were off the hook and no longer were viewed as suspects. Now, unfortunately, they were never many other suspects in the disappearance of Joan RISCH. Now, I do just want to touch on something that I mentioned earlier. Joan had checked out different books from her local library, and one of the books that she checked out the September before her disappearance, which was about a month before, was called Into Thin Air, and it was a book that was about a woman who had left behind blood smears and a towel when she went missing. These findings would be reported in the Fence Viewer, which was the local newspaper where they lived, and this prompted a group of library volunteers to look through all of the records that would show the books that Joan checked out. They found that she had taken out around 25 books over the course of the summer of 1961, and many of these books were about missing people and murder cases, some of which were similar to the circumstances of her own disappearance and possible murder. Now, because of this detail, which is pretty eerie if you ask me, some reporters and their colleagues and people in the town would believe that Joan had staged these apparent crime scenes based off of her research or the books that she read in an attempt to disappear of her own free will. Rewards for any information regarding the whereabouts of Joan would be offered by the town of Lincoln, the Massachusetts State Police, and the Boston Record American newspaper, which ran an extensive series of articles about the case on the first weekend of 1962. But despite all of these efforts, there were no leads pertinent to the case. In 1975, the National Park Service continued with its development on the area for the park and would buy the RISCHs and other properties, and moved the RISCH house to Lexington. The stretch of Old Bedford Road where their house once stood still exists, but is not accessible. So there are many theories that go into play here, but the two biggest is, as mentioned earlier, that she must have been unhappy with her life, so she staged her own disappearance. But other friends and colleagues of hers believe that this is unlikely, claiming that Joan was very content with her life as a suburban housewife. One of her friends from college would tell the Boston Globe in 1996, quote, "I think Joan is almost certainly dead. She would never have left her family on her own," end quote. Her husband, Martin, died in 2009 at the age of 79. He never had Joan declared legally dead and would rarely talk about the case. On the one occasion that he did, as reported by the Boston Globe, he said that he believed she was still alive. He would say that perhaps she had suffered from some sort of amnesia episode or other psychological break, to some extent, and then would have forgotten to return home. But there was no evidence or history of mental illness as far as I could tell, and there was never anything reported in her family either. So I do find that interesting that that is what her husband would say. Maybe there was something going on that they didn't talk about, or maybe that was just some kind of way of coping researching and checking out all of these books and having a crime scene that matched so closely to these books that she read, you know, it really messes with my head, and I can understand why people would think that maybe she planned all of this out to, you know, fake her disappearance or abduction to go live a different life. But if that were the case, there was like no story or evidence to like explain why she would do that. Like, there was no indication of a lover or anything like that that would explain her wanting to leave. So let me know what